Welcome to the award-winning Dare to Dream podcast with Debbi Dachinger, covering metaphysics, ETs, shamanism, and channeling. Here you will find spiritual inspiration from today's thought leaders, along with cutting-edge insights from our interstellar brothers and sisters and ancient shamanic wisdom. Now, here's a new episode of Dare to Dream with your host, Debbi Dachinger.
Welcome to Dare to Dream podcast. This is the show that dares to explore the multidimensional, the mysterious, and the miraculous. Today, my guests, Andy Tomlinson and Reena Kumarasingham, reveal groundbreaking discoveries on past lives, between lives experiences, near-death awakenings, and the profound truth that consciousness exists far beyond the brain. Stay tuned for a mind-expanding conversation. Dare to Dream podcast won 3 Talk Radio Positive Change Awards, the COVR Award for Best Podcast. Whelp magazine named Dare to Dream one of the top 20 best podcasts to listen to this year, and it's high ranking on Apple Podcasts. You can find us video on YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, and podcast on any major podcast platform, as well as BBS Radio. This show is sponsored by Dr. Dane Here and Access Consciousness. They do energy work out into the world. So if you'd like to learn how to become an energy healing facilitator or take one of their programs, go to drdanehere.com and accessconsciousness.com. You can unlock your cosmic potential with a phenomenal free starseed video and report for an engaging exploration that investigates many starseed species in depth. Learn your galactic origins, discover your star lineage, and your celestial ancestry now. It is a free gift from me to you. Go to debbidachinger.com/starseed. That's DEBBIDACHINGER.com/starseed. You can watch me on Gaia TV. I did my second interview on the show called Beyond Belief. Go see my interview from last year and this year, completely different conversations, and also get a free 1-week Gaia TV subscription. So much amazing content to watch there. Go to debbidachinger.com/Gaia. That's DEBBIDACHINGER.com/GAIA. And if you'd like to become involved and receive one of my monthly offerings, I do shamanic healings online for groups for people anywhere in the world. They have been extraordinary experiences. Last month, we had 90 people online on the Zoom. So join us. Go to my website. If you do the Starseed gift, the gift, anything, or the Gaia, you will start to be on my mailing list and you will get a notification. We just sent one out for the one that's coming up next month. Love to have you there. And I will be speaking aboard a cruise ship to Greece and Turkey, and I am inviting you warmly to join. It is a mystery school at sea. Just go to mysteryschool@seac.com, and you'll see all the amazing presenters, all the land places the cruise ship will be going, who will be teaching us. Mystery School will be having unbelievable, deep spiritual experiences while we're there. I can't wait to be with you. I know cabins are already selling out for March 2026. All you need to do is leave a deposit. mysteryschool@sea.com. And now on to the show. My guests today are Reena Kumarasingham and Andy Tomlinson. Andy is a psychotherapist. He is also the founder of the Past Life Regression Academy and a founding member of the Spiritual Regression Therapy Association and the Earth Association of Regression Therapy. Reena Kumarasingham is a regression therapist, between lives therapist, and trainer and supervisor for the Past Life Regression Academy. Over the last 8 years, Reena has spearheaded the Pioneering the New Consciousness retreats. Tomlinson and Kumarasingham draw on the latest research on Savant syndrome, lucid dreaming, telepathy, out-of-body experiences, and past lives to show that consciousness exists independently of the brain. If you would like to learn more about them, go to regressionacademy.com. And with that, I welcome Andy and also Reena to the Dare to Dream show. It's really great to have you both.
Thank you so much for having us. We're delighted to be here.
Yeah, and likewise, I'm delighted to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's talk about your new book first. Between Lives, you both present this very powerful evidence that consciousness exists independently of the brain. Tell us, what is the most convincing case that you've witnessed or known about that supports this?
I think for me, and obviously I'll talk to Andy because he will have, he might have a different idea. But I think for me, it's taking a multidisciplinary approach. Because if we just look at near-death experiences, or if we look at mediumship, all the research into mediumship, or even if we look into the research into the between life spiritual regression, we've had quite a lot of people, skeptics poking holes at different parts of the research. But I think for me, when you take a multidisciplinary approach, and what we did in, for the book especially, was we looked at about 300 cases of near-death experience accounts, and we looked at about nearly 400 cases of between lives accounts. And what we realized is that, over nearly 700 cases that were taken, the accounts were taken over multiple decades from all over the world, that the stages that they go through when they have a near-death experience or when they have a between lives session are very, very similar. And so when you put all this evidence together, it's a really strong case to show that something is happening to the consciousness after, beyond the physical body and beyond the brain. And then if you add, like incredible cases like this blind, we've talked about this person who was blind since birth in the book. And when he was in the hospital, he had a near-death experience. And when he came out of the body, he could actually visually see what was happening around him. And when he came back from his near-death experience and he, merged back with the body, he could actually articulate what he saw. So when you have like so many different cases and so many different accounts from a multidisciplinary approach, I think that is the strongest case that we have, that consciousness exists beyond the physical brain.
I mean, it does raise the rather interesting question that is often posed by people with a very materialistic view. And their view is consciousness is something that's contained within the brain. And it's the things we see, we feel, our thoughts that we have, and very, very contained within that. And yet, most people have had some occasions when it appears that consciousness is outside the brain. It could be something as simple as being aware of someone looking at us from behind and turning around and seeing them, or going into the room where there's been an argument and the argument may have finished, but you can feel the consciousness or the energy of the consciousness behind. So Reena's been talking about various approaches where science has been looking at this and done it in very well conducted research studies. But if you go all the way back to the very beginning, the materialistic view is that everything started with a big bang. And then from that big bang, planets were created. And then on the planets, eventually life form started. And it evolved to a point of humans. And at some point, humans got a consciousness. So in other words, matter started. And then at some point, consciousness was created in the brain. But what if right at the beginning, there was consciousness, and then consciousness created the matter, and then consciousness is in everything all of the way through? And with that view, a lot of our work has been supporting it because we've been looking at different aspects of consciousness. But if you go to a skeptic with the view that matter started first, you could say to them, well, what evidence do you have? And I don't think there is any evidence. It's just a view that they started. And we haven't taken the position of these are our views about what happens when consciousness is outside the body. We've taken people's experiences, which are very, very real. I mean, Reena will talk, I suspect, at some point about her near-death experience, which was transformational for her. And for anybody to say, oh, that can't possibly be real because it was outside the body would be an insult to the depth and the intensity of the experience she had. It's a little bit like someone saying, I just experienced love for the first time. And then someone saying, but hang on, love can't possibly exist because it doesn't fit into my model of how people work. You know, they would say, well, hang on, but I'm experiencing it. It's real. I know it's happening. And I think this is the approach we've taken in the book by gathering lots of evidence based on people's real experiences and how it all paints a picture of consciousness surviving death and continuing from one life to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had so many thoughts listening to both of you. My first thought was when I was quite young, in fact, when I first moved out to Los Angeles from New York, I started having immediately out-of-body experiences. And I was so young, so it was really scary. I remember going to Santa Monica Beach and I apparently fell asleep. I was only 18 years old. And I fell asleep on the beach on a towel and I woke up and I was outside of my body. And I was looking at my body on the towel. And because I was young and I had no context at the time, I was really scared. The more I wanted to get back in my body, the less I could. So it was a bit of a struggle there for a bit until it happened. It seemed like quite a long time before I could, but I've had that. And then I had many other OBEs after that. And also, Eben Alexander's been on the show, Dr. Eben Alexander. And so I've, heard his extraordinary NDE story. And when you were talking about the consciousness piece, I was reflecting on this is actually a core piece of shamanism, that there is animism in everything and that there is no separation. That when they say we are one, I mean that cactus, that hummingbird, that river, that mountain, that sky, that rock, everything has a soul, has consciousness. And it's a really important part of shamanism to recognize how deeply connected we are, because that's actually where peace comes from, love, respect for one another, that there is no separation. So I love this idea you're talking about.
Yes, thank you. And, just coming back to my near-death experience, I'll just tell you one because, we wrote about it in the book. But the one thing that happened to me that really struck me was when I left my body. And when I left my body, I had, no choice in the matter. And it felt like I was being pulled in a riptide, in an ocean riptide. And, and as I came out of my body, I let go, or I dropped a lot of the egoic consciousness. The things that I thought were important to me in life really didn't matter at that time. And as I dropped all those, I felt a very visceral, very palpable expansion of consciousness. And within that expansion of consciousness, I just felt a profound sense of peace and freedom that I had never felt before in life. And it was also very interesting when I came back into my body eventually, that expanded sense of consciousness was still there. And I and to me, the way I would describe it is I was more in tune with the subtle energies. We're so attuned to the gross, the very, very tangible, the physical, what we can see, what we can feel, what we can smell. But it's these subtle energies that I was suddenly in tune with. And I'll give you an example of how this worked. So just as as I was healing, I was at my balcony and I was looking out the back garden, and my neighbor was mowing his lawn. And Andy came to me and, just to check up on me. And I said to Andy, I said, our neighbor's having legal problems. And Andy asked me, how did you know? I said, well, I don't know. I mean, the grass is green, the sky is blue, the neighbor's having legal problems. It was just a fact of life for me at that point. And 1 week later, Andy was out in the garden and bumped into the neighbor, and the neighbor was sharing his legal problems with Andy. And what and obviously Andy shared this with me. And what I felt was, because my conscious, that subtle, the most subtle form of me was so expanded that it wasn't sort of, in a grid of belief systems or cultural conditioning, because everything had fallen away at that point. I could feel and sense the subtle energies, the ripple of subtle energies that was everywhere. Like you said, we are so connected, but we're connected with energies that are so subtle that when we program ourselves to just focus on the tangible, we see the separation, but we don't sort of feel the subtle energies, which is that connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the audience, so they know, what precipitated your near-death experience, Reena? What occurred so that the NDE occurred?
So it was in early 2020, March 2020, and it was COVID. And I got COVID very badly, to the point where I felt two metal bands around my lungs, pressing my lungs. And I had trouble breathing. And it was also a time when there was a lot of fear around COVID, and the mass consciousness, as it were, the mass belief system around COVID was COVID equals death, and that if you went to the hospital, they would intubate you, isolate you, induce coma, and these were things that I really didn't want to happen to me. So I actually said to Andy, I said, is it all right if I don't know what's going to happen to me? I want to beat this, but, is it okay if I stayed at home? And so Andy was really kind, and he said yes. By the way, for context, Andy's my husband. And so, and so Andy was really kind, and he said yes, and he was my primary caregiver. And so it was rather unexpected, on the 10th of April, when Andy sort of said goodnight to me, took our little doggy girls up to his room. And I had there was a strong knowing as I turned the light off that if I closed my eyes, I wouldn't open them again. And this knowing was really interesting because there was a lot of peace that came with it. Apart from one little curious, lucid part that went, oh, really? And then there were like 5 light beings that came at the foot of my bed. And they did a lot of healing, and it was almost like the current life review, but they were doing a lot of healing with the heart chakra because, of a lot of my wounding, which occurred in childhood. And then I was pulled up. And and then the first thing they did was show me the earth, and it had plumes of, and there was a grid around it that looked like plumes of smoke. And then they said to me, why do people like to suffocate themselves? Which I thought was very interesting, given that COVID was quite rampant at that time. And, I didn't quite, I couldn't process it too much while I was having my own near-death experience. There was so many things to process, but, it hit, that question hit me. And then I had a choice of whether to go on. Well, no, actually, they were pulling me to go on. And the one thing that was holding me back was Andy. because I couldn't bear the thought of Andy coming down in the morning, seeing my lifeless body and feeling any sort of guilt or shock or taking any blame because, I had chosen to be here. And I actually wanted to write a note to him and to say, thank you. You've done everything you can. This is not your fault. This is just my time. I love you. I'll see you on the other side. So I was negotiating, with the beings. I said, can I please have 10 minutes?
Oh my goodness.
Write this note. Clearly I wasn't in the place to process what that I was having a near-death experience. And they said, no, you either come, with us or you go back to your body. And so I chose to come back to my body. And then the next morning, Andy came and I shared the experience with him, and we were both in shock because it was something that was very unexpected. But the one thing I realized as I was having my near-death experience as well was, I was going through this massive process for me, and nobody knew. I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't even tell Andy, the person I was sharing a home with. I couldn't tell my friends. I couldn't tell my dad, who I was very, very close to. And so then, it was a very personal journey, but that sort of helped with the transformation of my life, in the sense that I just felt when I came back into my body, I just thought, when you have huge personal moments like this, and very, very few people would have been impacted by my passing, except for a small group of people, and I used to be a people pleaser. And then I thought to myself, why do I twist myself into a pretzel to please people when, it just doesn't matter, So it was just a massive transformational journey for me.
Powerful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Extraordinary. Are you different? Because, obviously you're different because of that experience, but what parts of your life are different for you, Reena, and for you, Andy, because of this near-death experience?
I think for me, what really struck me is that our greatest, after my near-death experience, I realized that our greatest currencies are our time and energy. And so I am so much more intentional now with how I spend my time and my energy. I only spend it out with people that I really trust. And so my circle of people have become very, very small and very, very intimate. Mm-hmm. People that I feel that there is a positive transaction of energy and time. The work that I do is also very, very different. So, for example, when I was a child, I had a dream, and when I was reflecting back on my near-death experience, and I was thinking, this, if I had passed away, I would have ticked all these boxes, but I haven't fulfilled my childhood dream. So now I'm fulfilling my childhood dream, and so I think my life has just turned around completely, and I'm so much more aware of subtle energies as opposed to the super tangible. I call them the gross, yeah.
Do you still have psychic moments like you did with your neighbor and his legal problems?
Yes, I do have a lot of insights and information coming from the subtle energies, because when I first had my near-death experience, it was interesting. I was clobbered by a lot of information because I was so expanded, and everything my neighbors felt, I got the information and I was sharing them with Andy. But it was so, it was too much, and I wanted my still silent space. I wanted my peace. And so, I had to find ways to manage that. And so now it's quite intentional. So if something is happening, say, for example, with clients or something important that's happening with Andy, I can get, immediate information. Just don't tell Andy I said that. But, in terms of the wider neighborhood, they're safe.
Safe. And Andy, how did Reena's NDE change you? How did it forward your life from
I
that
think
point?
in one way it was to live much more for the present and enjoy every day that I have with Reena. While we do plan things together, it's enabled me to be much more focused on the simple things in life that we do, and it gives me great joy to do that. But the other thing is, Reena and I do retreats, and we do it with beings of light that raise all the attendees, including ourselves, consciousness to an expanded form very similar to the near-death experience state. So people are able to experience expanded consciousness without going through the traumatic parts that Reena had to go through. And in these retreats, we're able to teach people how to tune into aspects of nature and a lot of ways in which energy can be used in a very meaningful way. But importantly, start to prepare them for the new consciousness. It's giving them a taster, and then they need to go on their journey to ensure they maintain that vibrational state permanently.
Wow.
So I've grown and developed a lot by throwing myself into that and letting go of a lot of other areas of my life that I was involved with before. So it's been transformational for me in ways that I wouldn't have expected.
Mm-hmm. So, Annie, what actually happens during the in-between state? Is there a larger architecture that guides the soul at that time? What is going on?
Well, perhaps if I can give you an example, I was contacted by a lady from Canada, and her husband had died 6 months before, and she was finding it very difficult coping with life, feeling rather suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
And she thought it might be useful to do what's called a life between life regression, or we call it a between life spiritual regression, which takes people into very deep hypnosis, and then they explore their soul memories between lives. So she had a trip to England and she came to see me, and she went into a past life where she was a woman. Her husband had gone off to war, had died. She couldn't cope with life and had given up, and a short while later had died, which is like a form of suicide when people give up. And when she went through the death part, she was met by a spirit guide. The spirit guides are spiritual beings that oversee the life and sometimes review the life. And the spirit guide said to her, "This is the third time now, isn't it?" Meaning that there'd been 3 occasions where she'd given up on life, and went on to show her that there were certain things that happened in her life that she could have there were opportunities to develop new relationships or develop new interests, but she'd pushed it to one side and let go of it. So she left the spirit guide and then went through to what's called a soul group, which are groups of souls that incarnate often in different roles to help each other in their lives, sometimes husband, wife, sometimes a child or a parent figure, or perhaps just a friend that helps somebody if they're going through a very difficult life. But she met her husband from that past life, and the two of them went on to plan the next life. And they came up with various ideas, and one of them that felt like for the two of them, and the spirit guide agreed to it as well, was for them to have a life where she was a woman again. Her husband would be a man. He would die quite young, and she would have a lot of independence through developing lots of skills. So it would be easier for her to continue living without being reliant on her husband. And what her husband gained from it, he wanted to work through patience, and her job was to stop him rushing into new business ventures. So if he didn't rush into them, he would be successful. Whereas if he didn't show patience, there would be problems. So they were both helping each other. And when she came out of that regression, she kind of understood what had happened. And it was still her choice what she did with her life, but it gave her the spiritual perspective of looking at events in a completely different way. And she formed new relationships, got on with her life, and continued. And for her, she'd worked through a series of life events that she had problems mastering. And this is often what a lot of souls do, is they may want to work with a particular emotion or a particular life situation. And if they don't get it right, they may come back, try again, or they may even do a role reversal. If someone, for example, has been a victim, they may come back as a perpetrator just so they can experience the opposite, not as a punishment, but it's almost like to get a different perspective until the lesson is learned and people move on. And that really means that every life has got a purpose, even though we may not consciously know what it is. And there's an opportunity for us to grow and develop through the sort of life, through the sort of parents we have, through the situation we have. And all of us have got something called free will, which means there's never, ever a situation we can't do anything about it. It may seem really difficult. It may seem almost like it's a mountain. If we're in a powerless situation with an abusive husband or abusive wife, it can be very, very difficult working through it. But we have within us the ability to do that. And this is a wonderful thing, is that at this moment of time, there's so many resources around that there's enormous opportunity for people to work through these old wounds from the past, let go of them, raise a vibration, and then go on this amazing journey that we've been talking about into a new, different type of consciousness.
Amazing. That is an amazing story. And I can imagine how different she was coming out from that, having this expanded vision of this has all been on purpose. Nothing's been done to her, but for her, actually. And so now she can become an active participant, changing the direction of her life and the choices she makes. It's very, very powerful. Let me ask, have you ever encountered in your work souls who are incarnating from non-human or extraterrestrial or interdimensional origins? Does that
I'll pass
happen?
it over to Reena, because this is an area with her training where she specialized in helping these types of souls.
Yeah. I mean, what we're finding, especially in this time, is that we are finding a lot of what we term as non-human souls. And non-human souls are basically souls that hold different vibrations to those of human souls. And it's almost like, I can use an analogy. It's almost like taking a fish and putting them in a monkey costume and putting this poor fish in the monkey costume in a tree. It just feels really, really unfamiliar. So from a human perspective, there are so many challenges. There's physical challenges. There is, mentally, there is always pining to go home. Although, consciously, they don't understand what home is. But, it's just going back to the place where their soul resonance is in line with their, the place where the frequency of the place is in resonance with their soul resonance. And, some of them might have really, really difficult psychological problems. There could be, very, very deep low moods. Some people could hurt themselves because it's so difficult for their soul resonance to fit in the resonance of the earth. And so when these non-human souls, as we call them, come for a between life session, what is so powerful and what is so empowering is they find out, number one, that they are actually from somewhere else, and that the discomfort, they're not crazy, that the discomfort that they're feeling is fully in line with just being out of resonance with the frequencies of the earth. But the other thing they also find out is what their soul mission is. And so when they find that out, and when they come out of it, it's almost like they are empowered to power through with the mission. And the mission for what we term as non-human souls is always to help shift the vibration of earth through different elements. And we sort of have broadly categorized these different soul resonances. So for example, first there's the human resonance. And it's not that one resonance is better than the other, if it's a higher resonance, they're better. It's not that. It's just what's needed to push the earth towards the shift. So we've got the human resonance, and then we've got what we have termed the elemental resonance. So these are the souls who are on the planet, but they live in a different dimension. And a lot of them are quite nature inclined, so nature type spirits. And it's so interesting because I had a client who was obviously we don't share this knowledge with clients, we just go with their experience. But a client who was an elemental resonant soul said that there is a very thin veil between the world where humans live and where they live. And so if, say, there's a bomb that goes off on our planet, the reverberations will hit their dimension as well. And so it's, and their work is to help shift the resonance of the earth so that their dimension is not as affected by, a lot of the chaos and the drama that's happening on earth. And a lot of these beings are incredibly sensitive. And when they, and they crave, even in human bodies, they crave being out in nature. And then we've got what we have defined as like extraterrestrial resonant souls. So these are souls that are living, their home place is outside the vibration of the planet, but they choose to incarnate on Earth. And, they have various different frequencies, and they always come down with a mission. And so one of the students we had, this was so interesting because when we did her between lives, she went back to a place where she was watching how the vibration of a certain sector of planets were going through her different, through the different times. And so when they see that the vibration is a little bit skewed, they incarnate as a team and they come to Earth. And she was actually saying, when she came to after, she said to us, she goes, oh, she says, it's so sterile there. And what's actually quite colorful here are emotions. And, she really then started to enjoy the emotions, well, as much as you can, the emotional aspects of being on this planet. And then the highest frequency that we know of so far are called the starseeds frequency. And they are like super high vibration. They just come for a mission. And their sessions are very, very abstract, because even in session, to filter that frequency, that energy through a human brain to communicate it to us human, brains, it sounds very, very abstract. But again, they've come down with a mission to help with the shift of the planet.
Super powerful. Amazing to hear this and how you can assist people. And I know, because I do also a lot of work with star seeds, and also I interview a lot of people who channel extraterrestrials, very, very advanced civilizations. And it's interesting. I always like when there are patterns that repeat over and over again. It shows truth, 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 even though I can feel truth. but you just spoke one of them, which is about the emotions. And the ETs that I've had the great honor of speaking with have made it really clear to humanity we are not kindergartners, we're not looked down upon, we are not less than just because we are not quite as advanced in the length of time we've been alive and where we're at. But they say they honor us greatly because of the emotions we carry. And so I think that's an important piece of information. There are many people who like to push down their emotions or not fully experience their emotions, and we have a huge gamut of them. And
Yes.
it's important to know that we're actually revered because of this. And I could, say much more about the Greys and the experiments they've done in hybridization to bring back emotions into their civilization and to keep their species going. So this is quite beautiful. And the elemental part, that's super powerful too. I wonder right now because it seems to be a very interesting time on the planet with now this yet a new war that's starting to unfold between Iraq and Israel, and we've got the ongoing with Russia and Ukraine, and there's so many pockets around the earth where things are happening where people are not loving and kind to one another and have drawn a line in the sand and all of this. How do you see the elementals you're working with, or even the extraterrestrials? Because I know this is very concerning to them, these bombs, these nuclear possibilities. How are they responding? Are you seeing anything come out of sessions when there is a real heightened concern for what's going on?
We do. So I think we've got to take this from two different levels. So the first level is we do see a lot of concern, coming out of the human mind, the filtering system, which I call our human brain. But there is also a level where the earth is being bombarded by high vibration energy, and this is all part of the big shift. And a lot of these souls, when they go into sessions, part of their mission is to help with this bombarding of high vibration energies. And so what happens when there is a bombarding of high vibration energies? It's everything on the planet is incredibly agitated, because at the end of the day, quantum physics tells us, if we break ourselves down to the smallest particle ever, we are energy that's vibrating so quickly, it looks like string, right? And we're just patches of these bits of energy. So when we are bombarded by high vibration energy, everything within us is agitated. And that includes our emotions, our thoughts, and also our physical system. And also, the planet's being bombarded. So now we're seeing record numbers of, volcanic eruptions happening just recently. And so when humans are bombarded and they have and we have so much suppressed emotions, there has to be an expression of these emotions and an expression and these expressions of these thoughts. And it's coming out in the form of all this chaos and all this drama and all these wars and all these, disturbances. But what that's doing, it's part of the shift, because what we need to do to move into the new consciousness is to break the current grid of consciousness that's been around the planet. And, we've created the current grid of consciousness because we keep expelling emotions and we keep expelling thoughts, because energy can be created but not destroyed. So it's just hanging around. And when there's so much polarity, it's two sides squeezing this grid of consciousness. And eventually there's going to be a collapse and a break. And when that collapse and break happens, that's when we can actually move into the new consciousness. And so when we take people into sessions, they do recognize that their role is to help facilitate people in two ways. Number one, to help mitigate the fear of what happens when there is a collapse, because we're so used to it, yes, that when something we're used to collapses, or when there's a change, there is always, like a reaction, like a fear-based reaction. But the other thing is to help shine the light of what can be. And so a lot of these people are also working on the what can be, to basically show people that it does, even if it collapses, there is a way forward. And that's what we're finding.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that. Andy, are there more shared death experiences today? What do shared death experiences suggest about the permeability between realms?
Well, yes, this is when someone is at the bedside of someone who's in the process of dying. And when they actually die, the person starts to have an experience of being with them. So a little similar to the near-death experience, but they're not actually going through the near-death experience. They are actually as if they're joining that person on the journey. And whatever they're seeing, whatever they're experiencing, they're tuning into it. It's almost like their subtle body has been refined enough to go on that journey, and it's quite a profound experience for them. And there was one particular case, I think this was given by Bruce Grayson, who is one of the big pioneers in near-death experience. And he talked about the person having this shared death experience and being given some information about what had happened to another person that he couldn't possibly have known. And when he came back from that shared death experience and said what information he got, they went through and verified the information that he couldn't possibly have got that information any other way except through the shared death experience. So this is just another way in which people are having something with consciousness that's outside the body. And there's so many different ways in which people do it. And Reena started to touch on some of the others. There's terminal lucidity, which is one of my favorites, because it's so unbelievable almost from a materialistic point of view, because this is when people who are in a vegetable type state, perhaps from Alzheimer's or dementia, something that they're just being kept alive with through fluid intakes and things of that nature, not able to converse at all with anyone. And all of a sudden, about half an hour before they die, their eyes open and they're suddenly able to have a rational conversation and even recall things from childhood. And then they close their eyes and they pass away. And this has happened very, very frequently. But the problem is a lot of the people in the medical world just can't understand it. And it's the normal thing. If you can't understand it, hope it goes away and push it to one side. And there have been surveys, and they found that, possibly up to 10% of people who die, have this type of experience. So it's very common, and it has been going on for a long, long time. And finally, people in the medical world have started to write about it and publicize it. And again, this is another piece of the jigsaw. And it's putting all these pieces together that starts providing much more compelling evidence that consciousness survives death. And in fact, consciousness is all around us the whole time. And consciousness is in everything. We just need to open up our mind. And it almost reminds me of a story of when I took a trip into Brazil, and it was a boat going to see all the indigenous tribes. Quite fascinating trip. But on one occasion, we stopped at a lady who was providing herbs and healing for all the local natives. And they were traveling 1 or 2 days by boat to her to get these healing remedies. And it turned out she'd come from Colombia. And she was about, in the 70s. and didn't speak any of the local languages. She only spoke Colombian. And I thought, if she arrived really young and didn't speak the local language, how did she know what herbs to have? And she had about 70 different herb plants in her garden, and she would just go through all the appropriate ones when someone came in for a problem, and then give them the remedy. And through an interpreter, I said, how did you get this information? And she said, I talk to the plants and the leaves, and they tell me. This is a very shamanic thing, but it's also an example of the expanded consciousness tuning in to the energy of the plants. And there's so much knowledge that is available for us. We have to just open up our minds from the blinkers that have been put on place by the world that we've lived in the Western world particularly, that there's so many things that are possible if you have an open mind to what consciousness is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I will say that with ayahuasca, for instance, this is the plant medicine for healing specifically. It's been around. Scientists have found, archaeologists have found at least 5,000 years. It's been used on this planet by the indigenous. And when they asked the indigenous people, well, how did you know out of the Amazon forest, teeming, it's bigger than the United States, how would you know that particular plant, that particular vine, take them together, put them in water, cook them, and it will create this healing psychoactive brew? Well, the Akawar tribe in the Amazon said, we didn't, the extraterrestrials told us. But there are other tribes around the world who have said, the plants told us. The consciousness of the plants let us know exactly what to do with what to create what. So I know that this is so when you're able to, like Reena was saying about your vibration and what you're able to perceive when you're at a vibration, to have the vibration be the vibration that you can communicate with these plants. And they have extraordinary wisdom. They've been around for a very long time. So thank you for that story. And I want to ask also, because it's in your bio, it's in your book, about this Savant syndrome. This is something I find very, very interesting right now. Does the Savant syndrome cases offer clues to us accessing soul memories or higher intelligence or even ET origin knowledge? What happens there?
Well, it's just an interesting aspect of consciousness. One particular guy called Wiltshire was in a helicopter for 2 hours going around London. He came back and he spent the next 4 or 5 days drawing a detailed picture of all of the houses in a 2 square mile area, to minuscule detail of all the number of windows and the roof and the construction of it. An enormous, great big picture. And he just saw it for those 2 hours and was able to get access to it. Now, we put that forward because it could quite well be that he's got a particularly adapted photographic memory, or it could be that he's able to tune in to another level of consciousness. And we were just introducing it at the beginning because it's useful to keep an open mind to everything. I mean, there's no evidence, there's no scientific research being done to establish exactly what the cause of that particular is, any more so than children who have remarkable gifts. Mozart, who was able to, play musical instruments at a young age, or even start composing. I mean, where did all this knowledge come from? Could it come from past lives, and they were tuning into past lives? Were they tuning into the consciousness of other people? There's like question marks, and we use those as an introduction to say, well, look, let's just keep an open mind to what consciousness is, until we started to look at the more scientific, researched aspects of consciousness, ones that have been done by medical professionals, and peer-reviewed documents I mean, some of them are being put into the Lancet, for example, on near-death experience. So there's a lot of things that are well established. And with near-death experience, that's probably one of the most well-established areas because millions of people have had it, and some very prominent medical pioneers have published and studied it for many, many years. And we've simply just taken it further with the work we do with Between Lives and compare how the two parts go together. So these are all parts of this, an amazing jigsaw of what is consciousness. And I'm sure there's lots of other areas as well. We were recently talking to someone about experiences that people have when they're in a coma, which isn't something that we've studied ourselves, but it's opened up the door to another aspect of consciousness that we hadn't considered. So we hope this inspires people through the book to open their minds, start to do their own exploration, find other people's accounts. And half our book is dedicated to helping people expand their consciousness if they want to. I mean, you've talked about some ways in which people can do it through ayahuasca. So people can come through to the retreats that we offer. But there are a lot of things that are needed if people want to go through and doing a shift. And so we've indicated areas that people can do self-help work with to start shifting. For example, emotional issues. A lot of us are carrying emotional wounds from the past, and it manifests itself as reoccurring patterns. You know, I mean, a very simple thing would be like a phobia of spiders. You know, and every time you see a spider, you get the fear. But it goes in a lot deeper in powerlessness, anger, a lot of other emotions that go with it. So if people are going to move out of these lower vibrational emotions, they need to let go of them and work through it. So, you know, that's one area that we give suggestions, and we give various other areas that people can go on their own journey into an expanded consciousness through focus, through hard work, but from an inspiration through the information in the book.
Amazing. So what's next? Where can people find you? Where can they buy your book, Between Lives? How can they work with you, etc.?
So can I show the book?
Please, absolutely, yes.
Okay. So this is the book, Between Lives, and it's out now in the US on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, you know, all major book stores. And it's out on Kindle and audiobook all over the world. But tomorrow, the paperback version will be coming out in UK and the rest of the world. And so if people want to know more about me and my work, my website is www.reenakumarasingham.com, which is, you know, just my full name. Or if you want to know the shared work Andy and I do, it's www.pioneeringnewconsciousness.com.
And this regressionacademy.com, what is that?
A lot of my focus for 20 years was teaching people how to do past life regression. And through the academy, we trained over 500 people around the world in how to do that. Mm-hmm. That work is something that I've passed on to people that I've trained to be trainers.
Beautiful.
And I'm trying to do less and less now. I am getting a little older. Every time I look in the mirror, it reminds me of a few extra wrinkles on my face. But I am very active with Reena in what we call Pioneering New Consciousness retreats. And these are the ones we mentioned where for a week, people are able to be in an expanded consciousness state. Mm-hmm. They're able to tune into nature, the plants, the flowers, find the essence from them. And it gives them inspiration how to do that when they come out. And obviously there will be a level of continuing the journey of clearing things that are stopping them from permanently having those high vibrations. But it's almost like giving people a taster of what is possible, what they can do in the new consciousness. And that's so important, that when we are in a difficult time, if we know what it's like, where we can possibly go to, and if we've had it through an experience rather than just reading about it, it motivates people. And some of our students are doing absolutely amazing things now. We're just so pleased that they're able to help this big shift in whatever way resonates for them.
That's beautiful. So, Andy, Reena, this is Dare to Dream. What do you next dare to dream? What are your future dreams and goals?
My future dream is my childhood dream, and that is to become a published fiction author. So I'm currently working on fiction novels at this time with an amazing coach. So hopefully watch this space. That would be my next goal and my dream.
My dream is just to continue to be of service to the beings of light that are helping to do the big shift. And in whatever way I can be of help to them, then I'm quite happy to do that.
Mm. Thank you both so much for the work you do and for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having us, Debbie. It's been
Thank you,
such an amazing
Debbie.
discussion. Thank
Yeah,
you.
beautiful. I end today's show with this reminder: consciousness is not a product of the brain. It is the eternal field from which all life emerges and returns. Subscribe to this #1 transformation conversation, Dare to Dream with Debbi Dachinger. Leave a comment and share. Thank you for liking and commenting. It makes a difference. Next week on the podcast, I'm speaking with Debbie Solaris, who's an ET contactee, interdimensional traveler, and a galactic historian. After a fateful extraterrestrial contact experience, Debbie awakened to her true star lineage and her higher calling. So be sure to tune in. Thanks for joining us today on Dare to Dream.